Good evening. I'm Vincent Morfoni, and on behalf of the Australian Calabrese Cultural Association, I want to welcome you to this edition of the program Sono Calabrese, which is a series of conversations with members of the community who tell us about their experiences and their background in the broader community. And today we're very fortunate to have with us Mr. ACCA Dichieri, who lives in Ballarat, and he's kindly made available his home. And ACCA has been involved in community affairs in the Ballarat area for a very long period, but most recently he's one of the people that was involved in the publication of the book of the history of the Italians in Ballarat. So welcome, ACCA, and thank you for taking the time to participate in our program. First of all, you're living in Ballarat, but were you born in Calabria?
Yes, I was. We were born in a little town called Calatria, which is in the province of Reggio Calabria, or near Gaulonia. And yes, I was 8 years old when we came out to Australia.
Yeah. Gaulonia is very famous because it's got a Tarantella festival, which you might have heard, and one of the better known folk music performers, Mimmo Cavallaro, was born in Gaulonia. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was actually in Melbourne, I think in 2019.
We were meant to go to that festival.
Yeah.
Remember what it was called, but because of COVID we weren't able to go.
And every year in Gaulonia, apparently they have this fantastic Tarantella festival. So you were born there, and how many siblings did you have?
I have three brothers and two sisters.
Right, and they were all born in Italy.
Yes, we're all born in. Yes,
And what did your parents do in Calabria?
Well, I guess they were subsistence farmers. We had, we had our little house in the little village of Calatria, and we had plots of land spread throughout the area, and just worked out and eked out a subsistence living with growing fruit and veggies, and we sort of managed.
Good. And I take it your father, was he in the Second World War?
Yes, he was, and like all Italians would have fought in the Second World War. Dad was in Africa, and he would have been there from probably 1940 for a number of years. Yeah.
So you're a post-war child.
Yes, I was born in 1948.
Right.
Yeah.
And was your father captured during the war? Was he?
Yes, like a lot of Italians in Africa, or like Italian soldiers, he was captured, and he ended up in America, in California, and he spent 29 months there as a POW.
Yeah. And did he talk about his experience as a POW when he?
Yeah, well, when my brother-in-laws used to visit, when they were courting, they'd sort of have a few glasses of wine. They'd pump Dad for information, so he'd tell us a lot of stories about his war experiences, and they were always funny stories. But he obviously kept a lot of the more gruesome parts of the war to himself, and yes.
And where did he go? He was captured in Africa, and did he go directly to America, or did he go with someone in transit?
Yeah, we would have spent, I think, about 8 to 10 days in Africa as a POW, and then caught by the British and handed over to the Americans, and he loved that because the Americans gave them rations of food, and the Italian soldiers were cutting it in half and keeping some, and they said, no, this is your food from now, you get some more later. Dad said, well, we had chewing gum in our rations, so he was just so delighted to be a POW to the Americans.
That apparently is a very fairly common story, in the sense that there are stories from other Italians who were captured in Africa but were kept as prisoners of war in, for example, South Africa, in Durban, and some were actually even sent to Australia. And indeed, there's one chap, a fellow called Joe Petty, whose father was captured in Africa and came out to Australia, but before that he was actually sent to India. And his experience about the lack of food, and that's not to blame anybody, because as I think as they all say, the British didn't have enough rations for themselves.
Absolutely, yes,
But the experience in terms of the abundance of provisions is stark compared when you compare what happened with people who went to India and South Africa to the people who went to the United States. And Mr. Perry, when he got to Australia, it was like, again, coming to heaven. As I would imagine your father would have felt in terms of the contrast between Africa and then landing in California. And so I take it he had a positive memory of...
Look, he had a very positive memory, and he had a lot of positive things to say about America. In fact, he wanted to stay there. As I was saying earlier, his father actually died in America in 1927, and when they arrived in America, he woke up from a dream, and he was asking where are we, and he realised that he was in the same place where my grandfather was, and the dream was that his father was waiting for him at the port, and so that was quite an interesting little story. And then they landed, and they were put on a train and taken across to California, and was there for 29 months, a 3-day journey, and he really enjoyed that. He spent a lot of time picking cotton. He said you didn't have to work if you didn't want to. He said some of the soldiers would leave the barracks in the morning with an empty sack and get to the cotton fields and lie down and sleep all day and come back with an empty sack. And Dad couldn't believe why they wouldn't want to work. But so they weren't. They were well looked after. Weekends they could go out and visit Italian families, American Italian families. So his experience is wonderful.
And apparently, again, there was a very good network of Italian American families who did assist the POWs. And you see photos of them, for example. I don't know the day, but I assume it's at the weekend where they're having lunch together.
Yes. And then they even got to the point of cooking pasta for the American soldiers, as POWs. They were asked to cook, and it was just such a friendly. In fact, my dad wanted to stay in America. I'm glad he didn't, because I wouldn't have been born.
Did he say why he didn't stay?
Why he didn't? He wasn't allowed to. Right. They had to be repatriated, and I'm not sure whether they had an option to go back, but...
I understand that there was a limited opportunity, or a limited window of opportunity, where people may have had the opportunity to return, but if they didn't avail themselves of it, then that was gone. And how did your father find coming back to the village after he'd been away, well, I assume at least for 4 or 5 years?
Yes, he was. Yeah, it would have been 5 years between his war service and his POW experience, and then he went back to Italy, and I think he would have, he would have been about 38, 39. I think he found that really difficult to economically to settle back into a subsistence, and I think the war and his experience in America had opened up his eyes to different possibilities, and by that time he had friends in Australia, and so look, I think he couldn't see how with the land that he could have made a living for. He had 6 children to cater for, and so he thought, look, I will immigrate. I can't go to America, but I'll go to Australia and join my friends there.
And when did he migrate to Australia?
April 1951,
right.
He came here.
And did he come out on his own? Or?
Yes, he did. He came out on his own, and 2 years later, my uncle, his brother, and my eldest brother came out and joined him in. They arrived in Melbourne. Then, what happened was when they arrived at Port Melbourne, he was offered a job on the boat, by Pacific Dunlop.
Oh, right.
And friends of his said, "Oh no," said Cosmo, you don't want to work in a factory, particularly a rubber factory. Come to Mildura. There's plenty of work there, and you can do a lot of things in Mildura." So he took their advice and they went to Mildura.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did he stay in Mildura?
He stayed there so he arrived in Mildura at the end of the harvest.
Right.
So there wasn't a lot of work for him, but fortunately there was a local. Nearby where he stayed, there was a quarry, a stone quarry, and he was piecemeal work, so he managed to scrape a bike together, and he used to ride out to. It was in Coolong, which is just a little area out of Mildura, and he just dug gravel for a local quarry contractor, but wasn't making any money at all. It was really hard work.
Yes.
So he. And then there was an old digger who saw him working hard but not going anywhere, and he said, "I know. He said, look, I know you're working hard. Come where I am, and I'll show you a good gravel pit."
Right.
And from that day on, he was able to, because it was contract work, and he was able to make a fair bit of enough money to send back to Italy to look after the family.
So he didn't know anyone in Mildura?
Yeah, no, he had some friends.
So
He had friends, Bayazani from the same village, and they were also Dichieris, but not closely related. Right. And he worked in the quarry for probably a year or so, and then went across to Wentworth and worked for a northern Italian, Mr. Buffoni,
right.
he had brickworks,
right,
and he made bricks and clay pipes and for a while.
Because in '52, as I recollect, there was a depression in Australia. Your father would have spoken about it. That unemployment was rife, and it was that at that time, of course, there was no real social security, and that some of those people really did it pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine in those days Mildura still had dirt roads, and they had horse and cart and the odd car, so it was still fairly primitive, and the area was developing, fruit blocks were developing, and so he managed to scrape a job with other Italians who looked after him, and
Did he stay in Mildura? Or?
No, he decided to look for more opportunities and went to Adelaide.
Right.
And worked at GMH for a little while, and so that was quite an interesting experience with. And once again, there are other Bayazani in Adelaide that he could.
And how long did he stay in Adelaide?
He stayed in Adelaide for about 2 years. Yeah, roughly 2 years. So.
And what? Then returned to Mildura, or did he?
Return by that time, my uncle and my eldest brother joined him, and they worked at GMH together. But of course, being rural country people, the city wasn't their scene, so they returned back to Mildura and bought a fruit block, which is
And they stayed there.
Yeah, they stayed. So they stayed there for a little while, and the block is still in the family, and of course a lot bigger now. And then he returned to Italy in 1955, late 55, and sold all our properties, got all our passports organised, both my family, our family, and my uncle's family, and we came out, followed him in a boat.
And so when did you arrive in Australia?
We arrived on the 1st of November 1956.
Right, and what was the ship?
It's really, I think it's the Sydney, something like that.
That was one of the ones.
Yeah, the Sydney, it was the Sydney,
yeah.
Yeah,
Achille Lauro.
That's right,
That did the thing.
Yeah.
And do you recollect the journey?
Oh, absolutely. The journey was just fascinating. I was 8 years old, and my younger brother was 2 years younger than me, and my brother before me, so there were 2 years between us all, and we just ran right on the ship. while our older sister, who was the authoritarian, and they were all seasick. So we just ran riot. we had great fun.
Yeah, had a holiday because of the...
yeah. So it took a month. It took a month to get across, and Dad wasn't with us because his re-entry permit into Australia was running out. Right. So he had to fly back to Australia.
And you would have gone through the Suez Canal.
Yes,
and you have a memory of the change in climate and temperature.
Not only that, but also the amount of military manoeuvres that was on both sides. And
that was at the time of the Suez Canal.
Absolutely. I had no idea then, obviously, but now historically I realise it was the Suez Canal crisis that happened,
And you recollect the troops?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you've landed in Melbourne, and did you go straight to Mildura?
Yes, we remember we must have stayed with friends overnight and then jumped on the train. I can still smell the steam. It was the old steam train, the old Red Rattlers, and steam train, and got to Mildura, and we were picked up by friends we were in a Bedford truck, open truck, and I remember going from, because we lived out at Merdeen, which is about an 10 kilometre drive, and going down a long driveway in my parents' property, and the vines at that stage just flipping past. It's just I can still recollect that.
And tell me, were you struck by the difference in the topography between Australia and I mean, it's pretty flat, especially going to Mildura compared to the region that you're from.
Oh, absolutely. It was just dead flat compared to the mountains that we came from, and.
And being 8 years old, I take it you would have done some schooling in Italy.
Did a little bit of grade 1,
And what about in Australia? Did you go straight into school?
Yeah, went straight. Well, obviously by November we would have spent the Christmas holidays, and then in '57 we
did
started.
Did you speak English?
Well. Not really. We learned. Dad taught us a few words like like a fox and really
fox.
just a few basic words. Dad's Italian wasn't that great.
No.
But it didn't take long to learn English. But there were some little things like the teacher saying, "Take that grin off your face," and I'd look around and say, so I knew what green was, but grin, I didn't understand what grin was, but it didn't take us long to pick up the language.
And did you make friends with Australian children?
Well, we had to, because we not had to. There weren't many Italians apart from my cousins. The rest were, and there were one or two Italians who were established in the but we made friends fairly quickly.
For children, I think it was easier to learn the language, because if you did make friends with Australian children, somehow you learned to communicate, and you learned English a lot quicker than the parents.
Absolutely, So we spoke English at school and Italian at home, and
Well, that's what I meant to ask you. When you say Italian, was it Calabrese? Or
it was Calabrese. Unfortunately, it was Calabrese.
Not unfortunate. That's a language. So everybody says it's a dialect. Well, it's not correct. It's actually a language.
Absolutely.
And it was a written language before Mussolini decided that. A different dialect that to be the national language. So you would have spoken Calabrese in the home, English outside the home.
Yes.
And virtually living two lives.
Absolutely. In our communication, and and
in terms, and I take it would have been easier for you to assimilate because you were young. And you went through high school, and
Look, we assimilated well. We copped a little bit of race, a little bit of bigotry, racism, but it was really interesting because a little bit of that was by established Italians who probably didn't realise that the name like Gervasoni, that's an Italian name. And there were three brothers. The oldest one was a really nice guy, but the two younger ones who really intent on giving us grief.
Yeah.
But we soon fixed them.
Is that because, maybe you were the newcomer?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But look, we fitted in because we started playing football and cricket, and we were as good as the best of them at cricket, and we were also fairly reasonably smart in class, and so we accepted. Yeah.
And sport, I think, was a great binder, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Because it didn't matter whether you could talk or not, as long as you could play footy.
Absolutely.
You were accepted, at least during the game and the training. Yeah. So I know we'll get onto it, but in the book that you helped publish, the history of the Italians in Ballarat, you say that you became very assimilated, and you forgot a bit about your Italian or Calabrese background. But is that correct?
Well, yes, because a lot of examples that we would have our homemade salami and sausages and homemade bread and so that's what we had for lunch to take to school. And the Aussie kids had the white bread with the Vegemite and jam, whatever. We wanted that, but we used to hide our. You wouldn't do it now because everyone wants to.
Well, now it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't want to have a part of that, and so it was. But we've made a big effort to assimilate. And later on, when I was a teenage, Mum used to say to me, Jesse, why don't you go and learn? There's an Italian priest. Go and learn Italian. And I wish I had listened to it, and I didn't want to know about it.
Yeah, although I've got to say there's a photo of you in the book making passata, and that's in 2000. So there must have been some of the customs that you retained.
Well, absolutely. We, pasta. I make a lovely pasta sauce with chicken, and it's very basic passata that we make, and I've got Aussie friends here in Ballarat, and we've been doing it for about 25 years. Where we once in March each year we get together and have a day where we make passata. But I learned that from my mother and my parents.
And you mean, did your parents make the salami as well?
Oh, absolutely. Each year in June, you pick a weekend, they slaughter the pig. And spend a whole weekend cutting it all up and then preserving it through pancetta and all that. Yeah.
But do you do that now?
No, we don't. No.
All right. And you went to high school in Mildura?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think you ultimately went to study engineering.
Yeah. So then, as I got to finishing off high school, I decided we came to Ballarat because the School of Mines here in Ballarat that ran engineering, geology, and so I studied civil engineering in Ballarat and became a civil engineer in 1972.
And you came out here on your own in Ballarat?
Yes, with some Aussie friends, but it was I was the only one in our family that managed to get away from the rural.
And have you got siblings? You've got siblings?
Yes.
Did they all remain in Mildura?
They all remained. They all the girls married other fruit block owners, and my brothers. My eldest brother went off in his own and had his own family with his fruit block, and the two brothers beside me, above and below, they stayed and worked with Dad, and they expanded the property, bought more property, and when Dad retired, they took over the property.
And so they're still there?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And are they still working the block?
Yeah, now my youngest brother, when Dad passed away, he took over the family property, and now his two boys have got the property, and they've expanded it.
Right.
It started off as 15 acres, but now it's a couple of hundred acres. Right. Because you've got to get big to make ends meet. Yeah.
And have you ever returned to Italy?
We did. We returned in end of 1996. We went back to. My youngest daughter, worked in France for a year, and then we visited. I was self-employed, but I took my long service leave.
Right.
You do that when you can. And we travelled to Italy, caught up with our daughter in France, and then travelled through Italy and went down to the village and spent Christmas with my uncle
And what are your memories of returning?
Oh, my memories of how small things were. Like, particularly, I used to think that the little alleyway behind our house was big and wide, and there was a big retaining wall. But no, everyone's really small. But I remember it as being spacious, and the distances was, but no, they're really close together and so forth. So, yeah.
And did you find, were you able to sort of fit in, or did you think yourself as a stranger, basically?
When I went back?
Yeah.
Oh, no, look, they were so welcoming, and there were still people there that we sort of grew up with as children, but they were still there and they'd asked all these questions about various people. I didn't know who they were, but people from the village who came out to Australia, and they all wanted to know about my sisters, because so we're sort of a bit of a split family. 3 of us were born before the war, and 3 after the war. So there's 10-year difference. So my sisters were teenagers when we left Italy, and so the women in the village knew my sisters really well. So they wanted to know what they were like and how things were in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, and the experience in engineering. Did you practice?
Yes, I practiced for a couple of years. I worked here at the Ballarat, the water board. It's now Central Highlands Water as a design engineer, but only practiced for a couple of years. Mainly, the water board in those days was a fairly conservative organisation. I was young and just come out of university and had all these ideals and. So I ended up leaving and went teaching.
Yeah. But whilst you were working as an engineer, I think you were one of the people that set up the Ballarat Environment.
Yes, yeah, we in
association.
Yes, Ballarat Environment Action. There was a group of 6 of us that. We started reading. Books like Limits to Growth from the Club of Rome, and people that gave some thought to population growth and the fact that one of the limits to our existence on Earth as human beings is our growth, and we really need to start to limit our consumption and so forth. So we in those days Ballarat sort of began to grow, and this group felt that instead of going out, miles out of Ballarat and, creating little sort of pockets, little hamlets where you had to service it, Ballarat should maintain its within its boundary rather than expand. And that's one of the problems we have in Australia, that we've got so much land. And having said that, I live on 12 acres. So, it was hard to... So we're really talking about resources and the servicing costs, and we should limit... So we set up this... It was a fairly radical group of young people that made the authorities think about planning issues. That's what we're doing. Yeah.
And that was it around about the same time that the trade union movement became very active in trying to maintain what it perceived as a historical integrity of some of the cities, beginning, for example, with people like Monday in Sydney, and then spreading down to Victoria, and especially the BLF, as it used to be known.
Yes.
Because you were also involved, were you not, in trying to preserve aspects of Ballarat.
Yeah, absolutely. If you know Ballarat, as you come into it from Melbourne, the first thing you see is the Golden Arches of McDonald's, and that was a beautiful old building, and that's one of the things that the Environment Group did. We blockaded it, and we sought the assistance of the BLF, which we got, and we actually won the battle, because McDonald's decided to not pull that building down and preserve it, and it's still a beautiful historic. And to their credit, they did a great job in preserving the old bricks and so forth. And
now, at that time, the leader in Victoria of the BLF, at least, was Norm Gallagher.
That's right.
He was a man, as you would know, about whom there's a variety of opinions. But did you deal with him?
No, I didn't deal with him directly. We just made sure that that building wasn't. I actually dealt with later on, just up further in Sturt Street, there was a beautiful block of two-storey mansions that we're now at the corner of Drummond and Sturt Street. There's a Shell service station, and we fought really hard to say that, but unfortunately we weren't able to because Shell had a lot of power. So we used a local politician who helped us. But yeah,
and I think there was a development. Is it Windermere? Was that?
Yeah, Windermere. That's where we really cut our teeth in trying to stop the development. And where I was so early about satellite development, and it did go ahead, but it had to have modifications. And in fact, one of the prime movers is an Italian who worked with Hayden's Real Estate, Nick Martino, who I got to know later. And we used to meet with Nick and have quite a few debates. And so we organised a public meeting, and we had the public meeting organised in a little fishing club, and all of a sudden 300 people turned up to this meeting. So, and we had the person that was chairing the meeting was named Peter Lawler, who was a great grandson of the Eureka Peter Lawler. And he said to people, just pick up your chairs and we'll walk across to the rowing club and we'll have the meeting there. So my great-grandfather would have said, pick up your guns and fight them. But I'm going to say, just pick up your chairs. So we had 300 people turn up to this meeting to try and stop this development. Yeah. So that was quite So I've got a bit of a sort of a radical checkered sort of background.
Well, that's but in terms of the Ballarat Environment Action group, how many members did it have?
Well, there were 6 of us in the group who were the main drivers, but we had a lot of support. We would have had as I said, we ran this meeting. 300 people turned up. So
clearly. You didn't have 300 members.
No.
And what it indicates is that a very small group,
absolutely,
if it has the will to do so,
yeah,
can be very effective.
And we became fairly savvy in not manipulating, but using the local media, the local courier. The local courier loved antagonism, controversy,
and content probably.
Well, what had happened was that I was working at that time. I was working as an engineer at the Ballarat Water Board, and our board was made up of councillors.
Right.
So I got a phone call from the courier, a journalist, saying, do you have any comment about this development? And I said, no, I can't comment. And she really guided me. This is the reporter. And I said, okay. So I let it rip, and really ripped into the councillors, particularly the chairman of the board, who was a councillor. And all my comments appeared in the Courier. And that morning, following morning, I turned up to work. And the chief engineer came in and said, "What do you think you're doing?" He said, "Do you realise that you're criticising your bosses?" I did. I was 25, 26. I didn't really care, So it was quite interesting experience.
And as you say, you're very active, and some would have say that you would have had what would now be called left-leaning or Labor tendencies. Is that?
You could say that, but for me it was more of fairness and equality, and and consideration of the environment around us, and so you could even say, look, tend to be more of a greenie, but because I really believe that if we don't look after the environment, we don't have a life on this earth, and we've got to find a good balance. Yeah,
that's true. But you're active. Would you agree that that's a form of political action, isn't it?
Yeah.
But did you ever become formally involved in politics through a party or?
No. That was really interesting because in 1975, what happened with the dismissal, a lot of people, including myself, were very, very, very distraught about the way it went about, and there were friends of mine and other acquaintances were setting up a branch here in just out of Ballarat, a Labor Party branch. Everyone became active, and I turned up to the meeting, and the to sign up, and the first thing you had to do was to abide by the rules of the party. And I said, well, where are the rules of the party? Can I see them? I'm not going to sign up to a party if I don't know what the rules are. So I don't have to worry. Someone said, you don't have to worry about that. I said, well, I'm not joining. So I've never joined. I've never joined a political party after that because
All right, but did you ever even unofficially sort of assist either party in election campaigns?
No, not really. I think a couple of times I would have put out how to vote cards, but I've tried to keep, because I ended up in the public service. I try to keep my in fact I was a bit of a victim of nepotism in the public service that I didn't agree with, and it didn't take long for me to lose my job because I didn't do what I was told to do by my masters.
Was that when you were working as an engineer?
No. I left engineering, went teaching, and then after that I joined the public service, and I ended up as a manager of the Department of Labour in Ballarat.
Okay.
So I had probably about 15 people working for me.
Yeah.
And I had a vacancy in the office, and I received phone calls from Melbourne to instructed that I should consider a certain person for the job. And I said,
when you say instructed, I'll explain why I'm interested in this later. But was it a direction you will choose A or?
No, they never gave. No, they never give you a direction. They say, well, we know so and so is applying for this job.
Right.
Could ensure that he is considered. And I said, well, look, no problem. So I'm setting up an interview panel, and whatever the interview panel comes up with, then I'll accept that. And as it turned out, the person didn't get the job, and I know that he was a Labor Party supporter, and within a couple of weeks, I was called into Melbourne and by the director of my division, and basically told that I had to watch my back, and within a week after that, I was called back to Melbourne, and I lost my managerial job in Ballarat.
Who was it that made the initial contact with you in terms of suggesting that you employ this person?
Yeah, it would have been someone representing the chief executive of the department. Yeah.
And was there a familial relationship between that person?
No.
So it was just a political.
It was just a political thing, and that grated it, against my sense of justice.
Why I'm interested in that, of course, is that to me that is evidence of corruption, right? But everybody talks about corrupt Italy or corrupt Calabria.
Yes.
But nobody talks about corrupt Victorians and corrupt Australians when in fact they're doing exactly the same thing that people in Italy are criticised for doing. That is using political pull or political influence to determine an outcome,
Yes.
and
yeah.
therefore have someone ingratiated to them who, in sometime in the future, may be recalled or required to perform a favour for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so low level really.
Yeah.
It was a very junior position.
Yeah.
The person was working in the railways as a union representative.
Yeah.
He'd supported the local member, and this position became available in my office, and I was told to basically think about it, look after it, and I thought no, I won't.
No, and in fact, the fact that it was a low level position makes it even more significant, because if they were prepared to go to those extremes, and you say it cost you your job for such a low level, what must it be like when the stakes are higher, the position is more senior, and the money is greater?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And one wonders.
But the irony, not the irony. The thing is that my replacement.
Yeah.
My replacement within 2 weeks gave that person the job.
well, there you go, which is again, in my view,
he was prepared to
further evidence of corruption. Now, when you say cost of your job, what pretext did they use to?
There was no pretext. I was called back to Melbourne, so I worked in the Melbourne office for 3 months.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, well, it's not what I want. So that gave me the impetus to set up my own consulting business, and that's when I left the public service.
So they didn't sack you?
No.
What they did, they removed you as a manager from Ballarat, required you to work in Melbourne.
Yeah.
They knew you were living in Ballarat, so you had to travel daily to Melbourne.
I travelled for 3 months.
The inevitable happened. You thought, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Why should I do this? And so you voluntarily resigned.
I resigned, and I'd only been in the public service for 8 years, so I lost all that long service leave and stuff like that, which didn't really worry me. I was still fairly young, and I didn't want to be around that sort of behaviour, and so I joined the National Safety Council.
Right.
After John Friedrich, the debacle. And so I joined there as a health and safety consultant, and we rebuilt the National Safety Council office in Victoria, and worked there for a number of years, and then went out mine and set up my own company.
And doing consulting work.
Doing consulting
on
work.
AHS.
Yes,
until you retired.
That's right.
Which is when, 2014?
2014, I think, when I retired,
And are you still doing any work, any consulting?
Yeah, I do a little bit of consulting work with a company, but by and large I do a lot of landscape and garden work, and I've got plenty of work here, and I'm really enjoying all that. Yeah.
Now, roundabout, I think it was 2000 or 2002, you discovered the Ballarat Italian Association.
Yes, yeah.
And you'd been living here since the 70s?
That's right, since 1969, yes.
And why that long gap? Were there no activities, or were you simply not interested?
No, didn't really seek out the Italian community in Ballarat. The Italian community in Ballarat is very, very well established. It's an established community, so they weren't that overt. And the only thing, in 1972, a young man came to Ballarat from Melbourne and set up Eureka Pizza. Mm-hmm. So that was my connection, in a sense, and you got to know Charlie Tarquinio, who set up Eureka, and so we enjoyed pizzas and pasta and so forth at his cafe. But other than that, I had no interest, no inkling. I got on with my life and didn't want to speak Italian, didn't want to do any of that.
And what led you to the Ballarat Italian Association?
So my partner Evie started working in a program for Gamblers Help, and in the non-English speaking background communities. And one of the communities she worked with was the Italian community, and came across people in the community who turned out to be the treasurer and the secretary, and started working with them. Not that they were gamblers, but met them through her work was community development and things like that. And she said, "Oh, we should go along to one of their functions."
Right.
So I did, and before I knew it, I was vice president and secretary in 2001 or 2002.
Well, that is a meteoric rise.
Yeah. So within a year, I was vice president, and then a year later, Charlie, who was the treasurer, gave me the nod, and he said, "We would like you to take on the role of president." I said, "Oh, come on." John Festini, who now owns Eureka, was doing a good job. I said, no. So we'd like you to, you speak good English, you've got connections, and so I became president, and I'm still president.
So there you go. So that's what, about 18 years?
18 years, and this year we had to delay our AGM. We normally have it in November, but we're having, because of COVID, we're having it on the 15th of February, and I'm stepping down. The transition has occurred.
Right.
I've done good, succession planning, and I've got some people there lined up.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
And, but you'll still be involved?
Well, I just want to step back. You know what it's like... once you've been in an organisation for so long, you've got to be careful you don't have this sort of ownership. And, the club's gone through a big transition in that time.
Well, you were there, I take it, when the decision was made to sell the land, which the club owned.
Yeah.
Where was that land? It was
about 5 kilometres north of here where we live,
right,
in Mount Clear.
Right.
Yeah.
So fairly close to Ballarat.
Yeah, halfway between here and the city. Between we live here and the city, the community in Ballarat, we're still having functions, but they were doing it at a local showgrounds, and in about 1975 they established the association. Actually got formally registered, and then they started looking for land, and they found this 4-acre land with mullock heaps and Ballarat's mining town, and they bought it. They bought it for $11,000, and then started to fundraise and so forth, and so then in mid-80s they were looking. They were obviously wanting to establish a hall for their community, and at that time I was still working with the department, but I was working before I became regional manager. I was working in the job creation program, and so we were handing out money to community organisations, and so the committee came to the department for funds to build a hall. So we gave them. They applied, like hundreds of other organisations, like COASA got money,
right.
A lot of other organisations, and they received an $87,000 grant to put up their building.
Right.
So in a sense, I was involved with the Italian community, but indirectly.
Yeah. And COASA got money. What, to build the buildings?
No. They would have got money to run programs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But they were giving out money for buildings, for parks, for whatever community groups put up. As long as they were employing unemployed people,
right,
they were able to get the money. And one of the requirements is that 80% of the money had to be spent on unemployed people.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that was a means of job creation. Basically.
Oh, absolutely. And in Ballarat, the Italians, if they're not shopkeepers, fruiters, they are concreters and builders. So they were able to put in and build a...
And what sort of activities did the Ballarat Italian Association run?
Well, basically... monthly lunches, I'd get together and either the older men used to play cards, but by and large it was getting together and on feast days or have regular Sunday lunches. Yeah.
So eventually, the decision was made to sell the land.
Yeah.
And you now got capital invested, I assume.
Yeah. Well, we ran the club for a number of years. And once I took over as president, but it became apparent that we needed something like $12,000 a year just to keep the doors open. And we weren't generating a lot of money, and we made the decision to. We had some meetings to look at different ways of being able to support the organisation, and because the location's in the middle of suburbia, now became suburbia, the land became fairly valuable. So we put it out to tender. We decided to sell it, and put it out to tender, and we had. Three or four developers approach us, and one particular developer made us an offer too hard to refuse, and we took it on, and we've made quite a bit of money out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And what? There's money just invested now? Or?
Yeah, we've got money in the bank and money invested in shares, and we live off the earnings. Yeah.
And what sort of activities does it run now?
Well, what do we do? We still have our Sunday lunches. We're now because we don't have our own building, we go to different Italian restaurants and have lunches. We have bus trips for members. We have in June we have a large celebration for the Festa della Repubblica, the Italian Republic. We've been running a film festival, Italian film festival, which we run in August. It's in its 11th year, we've lately we've brought out. Well, actually, we piggyback on co-as with Lucia Briganti. She's a pianist. Yeah. We had her out last 2019. Wonderful. She played to about 100 people, and then there was another. The Carlo Onzo trio is a world famous mandolin player. Came to Ballarat to play to 140 people, and that was just a wonderful experience. So we had the three tenors. So what about the three tenors? That there are Melbourne-based Italians who copy the tenors. Right. They came, and we had 200 people turn up to that. Right. But strangely enough, a lot of Italians don't come to those things. They're all like, we're spreading the Italian culture to the Australians.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, it is a good thing.
Why do you think the Italians don't come?
I don't know. Yeah. Some of them do, but others, and the people that come say, oh, this is marvellous, this is wonderful. I just don't know why, particularly the first generation of Italians that are here, people in the 70s and don't come to those things,
Which is a shame, but it's a common, I think, feature that a lot of people don't go out to those sort of functions. But probably one of the biggest projects through the Ballarat Italian Association has been the publication of the book.
Yes, well, we decided that we've got money and we have an ageing population of a community, and particularly the foundation members of the association. We thought we had to honour them, so we engaged an author, Jane McGuinness, and she produced this wonderful book. We interviewed over 50 people and told their story.
I meant, what's the Italian population in Ballarat at the moment?
Well, where do you start? Where do you stop? You look at this census. It's possibly around roughly about 200 families, right. But Italians have been coming to Ballarat since Eureka, and I've come across people that say, well, my grandmother was Italian, or my grandfather, or my uncle, but they've got strange names. Yeah, they're not Italian names. So.
But my point, are all of the 200 families featured in the book?
No.
Because I think it's about 50 families.
Yeah, about 50. We tried to pick the main. Well, we gave everyone an opportunity
Right.
to be involved, and some decided not to. But we were fairly careful that we picked the people that were involved in setting up the association. But also there's some significant people in Ballarat, like the Bizanis. Luigi Bizani is just a wonderful restaurateur in Ballarat. He went to Bendigo and set up the pottery, what was called the copper pot,
Right.
and then set up Warramang Vineyard,
Right.
and La Scala in Ballarat. They actually hosted a Commonwealth heads of government dinner. So he was, went for him to.
Yeah.